Part 1. No one went to the lower exterior ring unless they were out of options. The station authorities called it structurally compromised. Merchants called it bad for business. Most species simply referred to it as dead space, too cold, too dark, too far from anything worth protecting. Gravity fluctuated by a fraction of a percent there, just enough to make walking feel wrong. Heat leaked through fractured insulation panels and vanished into the void. Light strips flickered when they worked at all. People didn't disappear there because it was dangerous. They disappeared because no one looked. Marcus Hale noticed the silence first. He had lived on Farpent Relay for nearly 9 standard years, long enough to recognize when the station's background noise dropped below normal. The hum of conduits, the distant thrum of docking clamps, the overlapping echoes of hundreds of lives moving through metal corridors, those sounds never stopped completely. Except here. He powered down his cargo sled and let the engine whine fade. The silence pressed in immediately, thick and heavy, broken only by the soft tick of cooling metal and the faint hiss of atmosphere leaking through unseen seams. His breath fogged inside his mask. This was supposed to be a simple retrieval job. One abandoned container flagged by an automated audit system. Salvage rights already cleared. In and out. He should have turned around the moment he saw the thermal anomaly. 2 heat signatures, overlapping, barely above ambient. Too small to be equipment. Too irregular to be machinery. Marcus stood still for a long moment, gloved hand resting on the handle of his cutter. He wasn't armed. Civilians on Farpoint weren't allowed weapons unless they had a reason, and freelance logistics contractor didn't count. Still, humans had other advantages. He stepped closer, boots crunching softly against frost-dusted plating. The movement was immediate. One shape shifted, rising into a crouch with reflexive speed that spoke of training or desperation, or both. The second stayed low, pressed close behind the first, smaller heat signature spiking with sudden fear. Marcus stopped. Slowly, deliberately, he reached up and disengaged his helmet seal. The air burned his lungs, cold and metallic, but he kept his breathing steady. Then he set the helmet down on the deck, several paces away, palms open at his sides. "I'm not station security," he said calmly. "I'm not here to report anyone." The universal translator embedded in his collar pulsed once, searching for a match. The taller figure didn't relax. She angled her body protectively, shoulders squared, arms slightly spread as if to shield the one behind her. Her skin reflected faintly in the low light, not quite smooth, not quite scaled, something adapted for harsher environments. Her eyes caught what little illumination there was, reflecting amber gold. She didn't speak. Behind her, the smaller one trembled. Marcus felt something settle in his chest. Not fear, not surprise, recognition. No tags, no visible implants, no ownership marks, no station-issued thermal gear. Their body heat readings were low, dangerously low. Abandoned. He had seen it before on mining outposts and fringe colonies where contracts expired faster than compassion. Different species, different circumstances. Same result. He turned slightly and keyed open the side hatch of his sled. Warm light spilled out, steady and human yellow, cutting through the gray gloom of the ring. The heating unit inside kicked up half a degree, just enough to matter. "There's warmth," he said. "You don't have to come closer. But it's there if you want it." The translator clicked again. The smaller figure made a sound then, a soft, broken noise that might have been a breath or a word. She tightened her grip on the taller one's back. The taller one hesitated. Marcus didn't move. Time stretched. Seconds felt like minutes in the cold. Finally, cautiously, the taller one took a single step forward, never breaking eye contact. Her movements were controlled, precise, every muscle ready to react. She stopped again, testing, waiting. Marcus nodded once, acknowledging the choice without pushing it. "I'm Marcus," he added. "I live on the station, I fix things, I don't buy people and I don't sell them." That mattered. It mattered more than he realized. The translator finished parsing. The taller one spoke at last, her voice low and rough, shaped by disuse and exhaustion. "We have no registry." "I figured," Marcus replied. Another pause. "We have no claim," she continued. Marcus exhaled slowly. "Then no one owns you." The words landed like a dropped tool in silence. The smaller one shifted, peeking out from behind her protector's shoulder. Her eyes were larger, darker, reflecting fear and something else, hope she didn't quite trust. "Come on," Marcus said gently, gesturing toward the sled. "You're freezing." The taller one searched his face, looking for the trick, the hook, the hidden cost. She found none, only fatigue. Old scars along his jaw. A human who looked like he'd stopped expecting things to be easy a long time ago. She nodded once. They moved together, never separating, climbing into the sled's rear compartment with cautious steps. The smaller one sagged immediately when the warmth hit her, knees threatening to buckle. The taller one caught her without hesitation, adjusting her stance to support the weight. Marcus sealed the hatch and turned the heater up another notch. Neither of them spoke during the ride. He didn't ask questions. Not yet. His habitation unit was nothing special, converted maintenance quarters near the mid-ring, far from the commercial hubs but close enough to utilities to stay functional. Clean, organized, sparse. He opened the door and stepped aside. "Inside," he said, "slow is fine." They entered like feral animals approaching shelter for the first time, eyes tracking everything, cataloging exits, threats, cover. Marcus pretended not to notice. He moved deliberately, predictably, narrating his actions without thinking about it. Heat control S on the wall, water's clean, food's basic but edible. He opened a storage locker and pulled out 2 thermal blankets, setting them down on the central bench. Then he retrieved a pair of oversized station-issue garments, neutral gray, designed for humans but better than nothing, and placed them beside the blankets. "Clothes," he added. "They're clean." The smaller one stared. The taller one swallowed. Marcus stepped back, giving them space. He busied himself with the kitchenette, heating a pair of nutrient packs and filling cups with hot water. When he turned back, they had wrapped themselves in the blankets. The smaller one's hands shook as she clutched the fabric like it might vanish. "Eat when you're ready," Marcus said. "I'll be over here." He sat down at the far end of the room, facing away from them, and waited. Minutes passed. Then, quietly, the sound of sipping. Marcus allowed himself a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He didn't know yet that this moment, the decision to stop, to notice, to open a door, would ripple outward in ways the station, the sector, and even the wider spiral would feel. He only knew that 2 lives had almost slipped through the cracks, and humanity, for all its flaws, had never been very good at looking away once it saw something clearly. Part 2, the smaller one fell asleep first. Marcus noticed it only because the trembling stopped. She had been sitting upright on the bench, blanket wrapped tightly around her shoulders, hands locked around the warm cup like it was the only real thing in the room. Her eyes had tracked him constantly at first, following every movement with quiet intensity. Then gradually the tension drained out of her posture. Her shoulders sagged. Her head dipped forward. She leaned sideways, instinctively seeking contact. The taller one adjusted immediately, shifting just enough to let the smaller body rest against her side. One arm came up, protective without being possessive, fingers splayed flat against the blanket at the smaller one's back. Her eyes never left Marcus. He pretended not to notice. People expected humans to ask questions, to demand explanations. to assign value, blame, or cost. It was how most species operated. Everything was transactional, especially on the fringe. Marcus had learned something different in the mines. You stabilized first. You asked questions later. Anyone who rushed the second part usually made the first one worse. He finished his meal in silence, then rinsed the containers and set them aside. The habitation unit hummed softly, heaters cycling, lights steady. Normal. Safe. Finally, he spoke again. "You can use the wash unit if you want," he said, still not turning to face them. "Water pressure's low, but it's warm. Door locks from the inside." The taller one answered after a moment, "You will not watch." "No," Marcus said, "I won't." She studied him, then nodded. Carefully, she guided the smaller one upright. The smaller girl blinked awake, confused, then relaxed again when she realized she hadn't been taken. Together, they moved toward the wash unit, steps slow, bodies still close. Marcus listened to the door seal, listened to the faint rush of water. Only then did he let himself sit back and stare at the ceiling. He had not planned this. He had no long-term strategy, no heroic fantasy of rescue. He knew how the station worked. He knew how authorities reacted to undocumented aliens. Best case, they were processed and shipped off to a holding facility. Worst case, he didn't finish the thought. Instead, he stood and pulled an old storage crate out from under the sleeping alcove. He set up a second thermal pad beside his own cot, adjusted the heater output and laid out additional blankets. Options, not demands. When the wash unit door opened, steam drifted into the main room. The smaller one emerged first, wrapped in one of the oversized garments, damp hair clinging to her neck. She looked younger now, softer, exhaustion etched into her features. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw the prepared space. The taller one followed, posture still guarded but less rigid. She had scrubbed grime from her arms and face, revealing faint scar patterns along her forearms and collarbone. Old injuries, healed badly. Marcus finally turned to face them fully. "I'm going to sleep," he said plainly. "You can take the cot. Door stays locked. If you need anything, you wake me. If you want to leave, you can. No one's stopping you." The taller one frowned. "You trust us." "I don't think trust is the right word," Marcus replied, "but I don't think you're dangerous." That seemed to unsettle her more than suspicion would have. She hesitated, then spoke. "My name is Caliph." Marcus nodded. "Good to meet you, Caliph." The smaller one swallowed. "I am Saren." "Saren," Marcus repeated. "You're welcome here." They lay down together on the cot, still wrapped in blankets, still close. Marcus dimmed the lights and lay back on his own pad, boots off, hands folded on his chest. Sleep did not come easily. Every sound made Caliph tense. Marcus could feel it without looking, her breathing shifting, muscles coiling. Once distant footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Saren flinched so hard she gasped. Marcus spoke into the dark, voice low and steady. "No one's coming in. I locked it myself." Minutes later, the tension eased again. Hours passed. When morning cycle arrived, the station lights brightened gradually, simulating dawn that no one on Farpent truly needed. Marcus rose quietly and began preparing food. Simple rations. Warm. Reliable. Caliph was awake immediately. She sat upright, eyes sharp, watching his hands. Saren slept on, curled inward, one hand still gripping Caliph's sleeve. "You didn't run," Caliph said. "No," Marcus replied. "You didn't call anyone." "No." "Why?" Marcus paused, considering. Then he answered honestly. "Because I've seen what happens when people get handed over to systems that don't care. And because you didn't look like a problem, you looked like someone who ran out of options." Caliph absorbed that in silence. After a moment she said, "They will look for us." Marcus met her gaze. "I figured." Those who left us did not erase the record, she continued. They simply marked us unclaimed. That status does not last. Marcus set the food down and leaned against the counter. Then we need to change the situation. Saren stirred, eyes fluttering open. She looked between them, confusion flickering across her face. Change how? Marcus slid a warm bowl toward her. By making sure no one can just take you. Kalith narrowed her eyes. You cannot fight a syndicate. No, Marcus agreed, but I can out-paperwork them. That earned a pause. Then, unexpectedly, a faint curve of disbelief touched Kalith's mouth. Humans, she realized, were dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with weapons. Marcus spent the rest of the cycle at his console, pulling favors, accessing dormant systems, using knowledge most people forgot once they left the core worlds. He did not ask for payment. He did not ask for obedience. He asked for names, histories, consent. Saren sat nearby, watching him work, occasionally asking quiet questions about the interface. Kalith stood by the door, vigilant, but her stance slowly shifted from hunted to alert. By the end of the cycle, 2 ghosts had become people on record. Not valuable, not owned, just real. Marcus leaned back, exhausted. It's not permanent, he said, but it buys time. Time matters. Kalith closed her eyes briefly, then inclined her head, a gesture of respect among her kind. You did not have to do this, she said. I know, Marcus replied. Saren smiled then, small, fragile, real. And somewhere deep in the station's endless circuitry, alarms that might have rung did not. Part 3 time changed shape after that. Not all at once, not dramatically. It stretched, softened at the edges, began to feel less like something pressing down on the chest and more like something that could be held, measured, spent carefully. Marcus returned to his routines because routines were anchors. Maintenance calls, cargo inspections, long walks through the mid-ring corridors where the lights worked and people pretended not to notice each other. He did not tell anyone about Kalith and Saren. Not because he was hiding them, but because he understood how information moved on Farpoint relay. It didn't travel in straight lines. It seeped. Kalith learned the station faster than he expected. She watched everything. Memorized access routes, patrol schedules, maintenance blind spots. She learned which conduits carried power and which carried noise. Which sections of the station were ignored because they were inconvenient rather than dangerous. She asked precise questions and remembered the answers. Saren learned differently. She gravitated toward the small things, the hum of the heater, the way the light panels shifted tone during cycle change, the taste differences between ration brands. She spent long stretches sitting near the viewport in Marcus's unit, watching cargo traffic drift past like slow-moving stars. The fear did not vanish. It retreated. There were moments, raised voices in the corridor, the distant clang of security doors, when Saren froze and Kalith's body went rigid, instincts snapping tight like drawn wire. Each time Marcus spoke calmly, grounding the moment without crowding it. No one's coming in, he would say. You're safe right now. Breathe. Humans, Kalith realized, were strange. Most species tried to eliminate fear by force, by removing the threat, by dominating the environment. Marcus didn't do that. He treated fear like an injury, something to be supported until it healed enough to bear weight again. The first real test came 6 cycles later. Marcus was halfway through a diagnostic check when his console chimed, soft but insistent. He frowned and pulled up the alert. A data query ping, routed through an administrative back channel he hadn't touched in years. Someone was looking, not directly, not officially, but enough to make his jaw tighten. He closed the panel and stood. Kalith noticed immediately. What? She asked. Someone asking questions they shouldn't be asking, Marcus replied. Nothing urgent yet. Saren's hands curled in her sleeves. Will they come here? Not today, Marcus said. But it means we don't stay complacent. That night, Marcus showed them the secondary access routes, the emergency bypasses, the places where the station's sensors were blind because updating them cost more credits than anyone wanted to spend. Kalith absorbed it like a map burned into her mind. Saren held Marcus's sleeve as they walked, not in fear this time but in concentration, grounding herself through contact. When they returned to the unit, Kalith spoke quietly. If they find us, they will not ask. I know, Marcus said. You could still walk away, she added. You have done more than enough. Marcus met her gaze. I'm not very good at walking away. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. That night she took first watch without being asked. Weeks passed. The station audit request never escalated. Whatever syndicate thread existed lost interest or found easier prey. Farpoint Relay returned to its usual state of controlled neglect. Saren began to laugh. The first time it happened, it startled all of them. Marcus had been wrestling with a stubborn panel hinge, muttering under his breath in frustration. The hinge finally gave way with a loud snap, sending him stumbling backward into a stack of storage bins. Saren's laugh burst out before she could stop it, sharp, bright, disbelieving. She clapped a hand over her mouth immediately, eyes wide as if expecting punishment. None came. Marcus laughed too, rubbing his shoulder. I deserved that. Kalith watched them, something shifting behind her eyes. A tension she hadn't known was there loosened, just a fraction. Later, when Marcus returned from a long shift, he found something new in the unit. Saren had arranged the space. Not rearranged, arranged. Blankets folded neatly, tools sorted by size instead of by last use. A small cloth marker placed near the door bearing a simple geometric pattern in her people's style. What's this? Marcus asked gently. Saren flushed, looking down. I wanted it to feel like a place. Not a stop. Marcus swallowed. It does. That night Kalith spoke again, voice low, measured. On my world, sharing a space like this means intent. It means you are not temporary. Marcus considered that. I don't do temporary very well. She accepted that without comment. The day Marcus filed the extended residency update was quiet. No alarms, no alerts, just another line of data in a system built to ignore lives unless forced to acknowledge them. But to Kalith and Saren it mattered. Saren touched the console screen with trembling fingers. We're allowed. For now, Marcus said, and we'll make for now last as long as possible. Kalith exhaled slowly. Then we stay. It was not a question. Farpoint Relay did not notice when two abandoned aliens stopped being ghosts. But it did notice later, much later, when a human engineer filed a formal objection backed by flawless documentation and an iron refusal to back down. That was still to come. For now there was warmth, food, quiet laughter, a door that locked from the inside. And three people learning, carefully, how to exist without waiting for the ground to vanish beneath their feet. Part 4. The station never announced danger. It never rang alarms for the kind of threat that crept instead of charged. Farpoint Relay only reacted to collisions, decompressions, power failures, things that cost money and lives in obvious, measurable ways. Quiet predation went unnoticed, unlogged, unchallenged. Marcus felt it before he saw it. A delay in cargo authorization. A maintenance request rerouted twice before approval. A security drone lingering half a second longer than necessary outside his corridor. Patterns. He didn't mention it at first. Not because he wanted to hide it, but because panic served no one. Humans had learned long ago that fear, once shared without purpose, multiplied faster than it informed. Caliph noticed anyway. "You're moving differently," she said one cycle, watching him lace his boots. "Your weight is forward, you're ready to run." Marcus paused, then smiled faintly. "I was hoping I was hiding that better." "You are," she replied, "from others." Saren looked up from the small repair kit she'd been organizing, her fingers stilled. "Is it happening?" Marcus sat down across from them, no tools in his hands, no screens active, just presence. "Not yet," he said, "but it's getting closer." Caliph nodded once. "Then we prepare." They did not argue, they did not panic. Preparation for Caliph was a language she spoke fluently. For Saren it was something new, but she followed, learning where she could help without freezing. Marcus updated contingency plans, secondary exits, safe caches, transfer routes off station if it came to that. He did not frame it as escape, he framed it as choice. The first direct sign arrived 3 cycles later. A message request pinged Marcus's private channel. No official seal, no return ID, just a location tag, Dock Ring 5, Auxiliary Observation Lounge. Marcus stared at the message for a long moment. Caliph stood behind him, reading over his shoulder. Her posture shifted instantly, predatory calm replacing domestic ease. "That is a summons." "Yes," Marcus agreed, and ignoring it would confirm interest. Saren's hands clenched in her sleeves. "You don't have to go." "I do," Marcus said gently, "but I won't walk into it blind." He stood, pulled on his jacket, and hesitated. Then he turned back to them. "If I don't come back within 2 standard hours, you leave," he said. No hesitation. Caliph met his eyes. "If you don't come back, I will burn this station down around whoever touched you." Marcus smiled despite himself. "That's my cue to go." The observation lounge was empty except for one figure seated near the viewport. Not station security, not syndicate muscle. Too clean for both. The being rose as Marcus entered, tall, elongated frame wrapped in tailored synth fabric, skin bearing the faint iridescence of a species that had never known hunger. Their eyes were pale, unfocused, augmented. "Marcus Hale," the being said smoothly. "Thank you for coming." "I didn't realize I had a choice," Marcus replied. The being smiled. "Everyone has a choice, some just have fewer good ones." They gestured toward the viewport. "You've been busy, filing amendments, adjusting records, taking responsibility." "For 2 people who needed it," Marcus said. "2 assets," the being corrected mildly, "previously unclaimed." Marcus felt something harden in his chest. "They're not assets." "Everything is an asset," the being replied, "including you." The being stepped closer. "You've disrupted a minor revenue stream, nothing significant, but precedent matters, you understand." "I understand that you left them to die," Marcus said. The being tilted their head. "They survived. Because I found them. Because they were useful," the being countered. "And because humans are predictable." Marcus leaned forward slightly. "Then predict this." The being paused. "I'm not handing them over," Marcus continued. "Not now, not ever. You can escalate if you want. I've documented everything, every irregularity, every abandoned contract, every violation of interspecies labor law. I've already forwarded copies." The being's smile faded. "You'd burn your own life down for them." They asked. Marcus didn't hesitate. "Yes." Silence stretched between them. Finally, the being stepped back. "You humans are inefficient." "Maybe," Marcus said, "but we're stubborn." The being regarded him for a long moment, then inclined their head. "This is not over." Marcus shrugged. "Most things are." When he returned to his habitation unit, Saren was pacing. Caliph stood rigid by the door. They relaxed only when he stepped inside. Saren rushed forward, gripping his jacket. "You're back." "I said I would be," Marcus replied. Caliph searched his face. "What did they say?" That they don't like being told no, Marcus answered, and you told them anyway. Yes, Caliph exhaled slowly, then they will remember you. I'm counting on it. The next few cycles were tense, too quiet, too still, but no raid came. No seizure order, no official notice. Instead, something unexpected happened. A message arrived, official, clean, station authority seal, a policy update, unclaimed labor classifications revised, residency protections expanded, liability reassigned. It wasn't justice, but it was enough. Marcus read it twice, then leaned back, stunned. Saren read over his shoulder. What does it mean? It means, Marcus said slowly, that they've decided it costs more to fight me than to let this go. Caliph let out a breath she'd been holding for weeks. That night they ate together, real food this time, fresh protein Marcus had splurged on, a rare luxury. Saren smiled openly. Caliph relaxed enough to sit with her back to the room for the first time. Later, as the station lights dimmed, Caliph spoke quietly. You changed the balance. Marcus shook his head. I just refused to move. She studied him, then nodded. That is how humans fight. Saren leaned against him, warmth and certainty where fear used to live. For the first time since they had met, no one waited for the next knock on the door. Part 5 life did not return to normal. It became something else. Normal implied a past state to return to, and none of them had one worth reclaiming. What formed instead was quieter, steadier, built from small decisions that accumulated weight over time. Marcus kept working, but he changed how he did it. He stopped taking contracts that pulled him too far from the habitation ring. He redirected his skill set toward station infrastructure, systems that touched many lives but belonged to no one in particular. Power regulators, environmental fail-safes, redundancy networks no one noticed until they were gone. Caliph noticed the pattern before he named it. You are making yourself useful, she said one evening, watching him cross-reference station schematics. Marcus snorted softly. I always was. Not like this, she replied. This is embedded. He didn't deny it. Humans survived best when they were difficult to remove, not by force but by necessity. Saren began accompanying him on short maintenance runs. At first she stayed close, flinching at sudden noises, fingers always brushing his sleeve. Over time, the flinches became pauses. The grip loosened. Curiosity replaced fear in small, careful increments. She learned how to identify faulty relays by sound, learned which conduits carried residual heat and which were safe to lean against. She asked endless questions, not because she doubted him, but because understanding made the world feel less sharp. Caliph trained in her own way. She mapped routes through the station no one else bothered to learn. Maintenance shafts, cargo bypasses, emergency ladders hidden behind panels marked obsolete. She practiced moving silently in the confined spaces, testing her limits without pushing past them. Marcus didn't stop her. Protection did not mean confinement. He understood that instinctively. The station began to recognize them, not as a unit to be flagged, but as a presence to be accounted for. A maintenance ticket resolved faster when Marcus's name was attached. A system anomaly got a second look if Saren reported it, quiet but precise. Caliph's shadow appeared in the periphery of places where problems tended to stop happening. They were not powerful, they were persistent. One cycle, Saren returned from a supply run with her hands shaking, not from fear but from anger. A vendor tried to charge me triple, she said, voice tight. Said my registry was provisional. Marcus frowned, and I told him no, she said. I told him I knew the posted rates. He laughed. Caliph's jaw tightened. Marcus stood, already pulling on his jacket. Let's go. They didn't threaten the vendor, didn't raise voices. Marcus simply stood there while Saren calmly explained the discrepancy, quoting station policy verbatim. Caliph said nothing at all. The vendor folded within minutes. As they walked away, Saren exhaled hard. "I didn't freeze." Marcus smiled. "You didn't." That night Saren slept without nightmares for the first time since arriving. Caliph noticed. "You're healing," she told her quietly. Saren nodded, eyes heavy but peaceful. "So are you." Caliph did not respond, but she did not deny it either. The message came months later. Not a threat. Not a summons. An offer. A mid-tier coalition, newly formed, was looking for station representatives, individuals with a reputation for integrity, technical competence, and an ability to navigate gray zones without escalating conflict. Marcus stared at the message for a long time. Saren read it over his shoulder, eyes widening. "They want you. They want what I do," Marcus corrected. "There's a difference." Caliph folded her arms. "This would put you in their sightlines, permanently." "Yes," Marcus said, "but it would also make it harder for anyone to quietly undo what we've built." Saren looked between them. "Would we have to leave?" Marcus shook his head. "No, it would just mean responsibility." Caliph considered that. "You already carry that." He accepted the role on one condition: that his habitation unit remain his base of operation, and that Saren and Caliph be listed as his immediate family under station charter definitions. The coalition agreed. Paper mattered. Weeks later, a minor incident rippled through Farpoint Relay, a labor dispute escalating toward violence. Security hesitated, syndicates watched, everyone waited for someone else to act. Marcus did. He didn't deploy force. He deployed clarity, clear timelines, clear responsibilities, clear consequences documented and visible. Saren assisted, compiling data with quiet efficiency. Caliph stood in the background, present, watchful. The dispute dissolved. Afterward, one of the coalition envoys pulled Marcus aside. "You don't act like a negotiator." Marcus shrugged. "I act like someone who doesn't want to see people get hurt." The envoy studied him. "That's rarer than you think." That night back in their unit, Saren prepared food while Marcus reviewed reports. Caliph sat near the viewport, watching traffic drift by. "I used to think safety was something you had to steal," Saren said suddenly, "or earn by being useful." Marcus looked up. "What do you think now?" She smiled faintly. "I think sometimes someone just decides you're worth the trouble." Caliph turned from the window. "Humans are strange." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Only sometimes." She shook her head. "You saw 2 lives the galaxy had written off. And instead of asking what it would cost you, you asked what it would cost not to." Marcus didn't have a clever response to that. He didn't need one. Farpoint Relay continued its endless rotation. Cargo flowed. Power hummed. People came and went. But in one habitation unit, 3 lives had intersected and refused to separate again. And somewhere, in systems and syndicates and quiet backrooms, a simple truth had taken root. Humans did not always conquer. Sometimes they stayed. Part 6 stability had a sound. Marcus noticed it one cycle while lying awake long after the station's night dim had settled in. It was not silence. Farpoint Relay never truly slept, but the rhythm had changed. The heaters cycled predictably. The conduits no longer rattled in protest. Even the distant traffic hum carried a steadiness that hadn't been there before. He realized with a quiet start that he was no longer listening for danger. Across the room, Saren slept curled on her side, breathing slow and even. Caliph lay awake near the viewport, eyes open, posture relaxed in a way Marcus had never seen on her before. Not alert, not coiled, at rest. The thought settled over him with unexpected weight. Rest was something earned slowly, often unconsciously, and lost easily. He wondered how long it had been since any of them had truly allowed themselves to have it. The answer didn't matter. What mattered was that they had it now. The coalition role grew quietly. Marcus did not become famous. He became reliable. Problems came to him when people wanted solutions that didn't involve blood or leverage. He didn't fix everything. He refused to. But when he did take a case, it ended with fewer people hurt than before. Saren became his constant shadow, not because he required it, but because she wanted to learn. She absorbed process and procedure the way some people absorbed music, intuitively, emotionally. She understood not just how systems worked, but why they failed. "You listen," Marcus told her once, watching her trace fault lines through a logistics report. "That's what makes you good at this." Saren looked up, startled. "I listen because if I don't, I miss things." Marcus smiled. "Exactly." Calith's role was less formal. She never took a title, never accepted a designation. She moved through the station like a quiet constant, known but rarely addressed. People learned not to block her path, learned that problems tended not to follow her. She watched over Marcus without hovering, watched over Saren without smothering. When asked what she did, she answered simply, "I make sure what matters stays standing." There was one incident, inevitable Marcus supposed, when someone tested the boundaries. A mid-level operator, emboldened by connections and arrogance, tried to reclassify Saren's status during a system audit. It was subtle, buried in language that assumed no one would read closely enough to object. Saren found it. She stared at the screen for a long time before speaking. "They're trying to move me back." Marcus stood behind her, reading the line she highlighted. His jaw tightened. "Yes." "What do we do?" she asked. Marcus didn't answer immediately. He forwarded the file, annotated with evidence and precedent, and requested a formal review. Then he stood. "We walk," he said. They didn't storm offices or make threats. They walked through the station, through the corridors and rings where Marcus's work had touched lives. They spoke to supervisors, to technicians, to administrators who had benefited quietly from Marcus's interventions. By the end of the cycle, the audit had been withdrawn. The operator was reassigned. Saren let out a breath that seemed to empty weeks of tension from her chest. I thought it would always be fragile." Marcus met her eyes. "It is, but fragile doesn't mean powerless." Calith nodded. "Glass cuts." After that, Saren changed again. She stood straighter, spoke more readily, began correcting people when they made assumptions about her status or worth, not sharply, not defensively, simply, clearly, and people listened. Months passed. Farpoint Relay rotated through seasons of traffic surges and lulls. Marcus's habitation unit gained small signs of permanence, a repaired panel here, a storage rack there, a shared space shaped by 3 lives rather than one. One cycle, Saren returned with something small cupped carefully in her hands. "It was going to be thrown out," she said, almost apologetic. It was a broken station clock. Old, analog, obsolete. Marcus laughed softly. "Does it work?" "Not yet," Saren replied. Calith took it without comment and disappeared into the maintenance alcove. Hours later, she returned and set it on the wall. It ticked steadily, marking time no one had bothered to count before. That night, they ate together beneath it. The future no longer felt like a threat waiting to pounce. It felt like something they might shape, slowly, deliberately together. Marcus realized then that the galaxy had been wrong about humans, not because they were strong, not because they were clever, but because when humans decided something mattered, they anchored themselves to it and made the universe work around them. Part 7. The first time Saren called the habitation unit home, no one commented on it. The word slipped out naturally while she was organizing supply crates, spoken without ceremony or hesitation. Marcus noticed because his hands paused mid-task. Caliph noticed because her shoulders shifted, just slightly, as if adjusting to a new weight. Neither corrected her. Home was not a designation Farpoint Relay recognized. It had no registry field, no legal boundary. It existed only because the people inside it decided it did. That decision carried consequences. Marcus received a request from the coalition not long after an off-station consultation. A border outpost struggling with internal breakdown. Labor disputes escalating into sabotage. A familiar pattern. The request was optional. Marcus declined at first, not because he couldn't help, because leaving, even temporarily, carried risks he no longer accepted casually. Saren read the request anyway. "They need you." "They need someone," Marcus replied. "That doesn't have to be me." Caliph watched him carefully. "You're afraid." Marcus didn't deny it. "Yes." Saren stepped closer. "Of losing us. Of leaving you unprotected," he said. Caliph spoke then, voice calm and grounded. "You didn't protect us by staying in one place. You protected us by changing how the station sees us." Marcus considered that. Saren met his gaze. "You taught me systems don't change unless someone pushes. You can go. We'll be here when you get back." The certainty in her voice surprised him. Caliph added, "And if something moves against us, it will regret the timing." Marcus exhaled slowly, then nodded. "Short trip. I check in daily." The outpost was worse than expected. Infrastructure rot layered over political cowardice. Marcus spent long cycles mediating between groups that had stopped believing compromise was possible. He slept little, spoke carefully, listened more than he talked, and every cycle he checked in. Saren updated him on the station. Small victories, minor tensions, nothing alarming. Caliph's reports were shorter, all quiet, no movement, "We're fine." On the sixth cycle, Marcus returned. Saren was waiting at the docking gate, trying and failing to look casual. When she saw him, relief flashed across her face before she caught herself. Caliph stood a step behind her, posture relaxed but eyes sharp. "You came back," Saren said. Marcus smiled. "I said I would." That night something shifted again, not dramatically, not visibly, just a subtle deepening of trust. The understanding that distance didn't equal abandonment. That connection could stretch without snapping. The station continued its slow evolution. More humans took positions like Marcus's, not because he recruited them but because his presence made space for them. Other species noticed. Some were confused, some were wary, some were grateful. One cycle, a junior technician approached Saren hesitantly. "You're good with systems," he said. "Could you look at something?" Saren hesitated, then nodded. She spent hours helping him untangle a cascading fault. When it was fixed, the technician smiled in relief. "Thank you," he said. "I didn't think anyone would help." Saren paused, then said quietly, "Someone helped me once." Caliph overheard. She didn't comment, but later that night she rested her hand briefly on Saren's shoulder, a gesture of acknowledgement, of pride. The galaxy did not change overnight. But on Farpoint Relay a pattern had formed. When something broke, people looked for Marcus, or Saren, or the quiet, watchful presence of Caliph. They had become a constant, and constants, Marcus knew, were the hardest things to remove. Part 8, the warning did not come from an enemy. That was what unsettled Marcus most. It arrived as a courtesy notice, buried in routine coalition traffic, a scheduled policy review affecting outer stations, framed as efficiency optimization. No urgency markers, no red flags, just language that assumed compliance. Marcus read it twice, then a third time. Saren noticed the tension immediately. "That's not normal, is it?" "No," Marcus said. "It's clean, too clean." Caliph leaned over his shoulder, eyes scanning faster than any translator. They're consolidating authority. Yes, Marcus agreed. And Farpoint's independence makes it inconvenient. The review wasn't hostile. It didn't mention seizures or removals. It simply reassigned oversight, layers of it placing decision-making farther away from the people affected by it. Paper violence, Marcus thought, the kind that erased people quietly. They won't target us directly, Saren said after a moment. They'll change the rules until we don't fit anymore. Marcus nodded. Exactly. Caliph straightened. Then we make sure we fit too well to remove. The next weeks were exhausting. Marcus pulled every favor he had, every relationship built on quiet competence. He didn't argue against the review. He contributed to it, provided data, suggested improvements. Embedded safeguards where no one thought to look. Saren worked beside him, compiling impact analyses that highlighted human and non-human dependencies alike. She learned how to write in a language administrators respected, measured, precise, impossible to dismiss. Caliph did what she always did. She watched. She mapped who supported the review and who hesitated. She noted which security teams were reassigned and which routes went temporarily unmonitored. She never interfered. Not yet. When the coalition delegation arrived on Farpoint Relay, they expected resistance or submission. They got cooperation. Marcus met them with prepared reports, calm explanations, and a refusal to dramatize. Saren answered technical questions without flinching. Caliph stood at the edge of the room, silent and present. The delegation stayed longer than planned. They toured systems Marcus had stabilized, met technicians Saren had trained, heard stories unprompted about problems that no longer existed. On the final cycle, one of the delegates pulled Marcus aside. "You've made this place difficult." Marcus smiled faintly. "I'll take that as a compliment." "It is," the delegate admitted. "Removing you would cost more than leaving you." When the delegation departed, the review passed with amendments. Local autonomy preserved, oversight reduced rather than increased. Saren exhaled deeply, shoulders sagging. "We did it." Marcus nodded. "We did." Caliph allowed herself a small, private smile. That night they sat together beneath the ticking clock, sharing a simple meal. The station lights dimmed. Traffic hummed beyond the viewport. Saren spoke softly. "I don't feel like I'm waiting anymore." Marcus looked at her. "For what?" "For someone to decide I don't belong." Caliph added, "You belong because you choose to stay." Marcus considered that. Then said, "And because we chose you." The words settled into the space between them, solid and unchallenged. Farpoint Relay continued to turn. The galaxy continued to be indifferent, but in one corner of it, 3 lives had proven something quietly, stubbornly, undeniably human. That compassion, when backed by resolve, could reshape systems built to erase it. Part 9, Final. Years later, people would ask how it started. They would assume there had been a moment, a confrontation, a declaration, a heroic stand that changed everything in a single stroke. That was how stories were usually told. It made them easier to digest, easier to admire from a distance. Marcus never told it that way. If anyone pressed, he said it began with noticing something that didn't fit and refusing to ignore it. Farpoint Relay changed slowly, then all at once. It became a reference point, a station other administrators quietly studied when their own systems began to fracture, a place where disputes were resolved before they calcified into violence, where unregistered workers became technicians, where abandoned contracts turned into permanent lives. Marcus did not take credit for that. He delegated more, stepped back when others were ready to step forward. He understood something many leaders never did, that building something that lasted meant making yourself less central to it over time. Saren grew into her role with a confidence that would have seemed impossible years earlier. She led audits now, designed infrastructure upgrades, spoke calmly in rooms that once would have silenced her entirely. When questioned, she did not shrink. She explained. Calith remained what she had always been, unchanged, unmovable, essential. She trained station security quietly, teaching them awareness rather than aggression. She walked the corridors at odd hours, not because danger demanded it, but because presence prevented it. People still didn't know exactly what she did. They just knew that when she was nearby, things tended not to fall apart. The habitation unit changed too. It grew warmer, more lived in. A second clock appeared on the wall. Plants, real ones, took root near the viewport. Repairs became improvements. Temporary fixes became permanent solutions. Home in the way that mattered. One evening, long after Farpoint Relay had earned its reputation, Marcus sat beneath the clocks, reviewing reports that no longer felt urgent. Saren was nearby, focused on a schematic, brow furrowed in concentration. Calith stood by the window, watching distant traffic drift through the dark. Marcus leaned back and let himself be still. He thought about the lower exterior ring, the cold, the silence, the two heat signatures barely clinging to life. He thought about how easily he could have powered up his sled and left. The galaxy would never have noticed. Instead, he had stopped. Saren looked up suddenly. "What are you thinking about?" Marcus smiled faintly. "How strange it is that everything I care about now came from one bad salvage job." Calith turned from the window. "Humans have a habit of finding meaning where others see inconvenience." Saren nodded. "And staying." Marcus looked at them, really looked at them, and felt something settle into place. Not pride, not ownership, belonging. Farpoint Relay continued to orbit. Systems aged and were replaced. New people arrived with old fears and learned slowly that this station was different. Because one human had decided that abandonment was unacceptable. Because two lives refused to break. Because compassion, once anchored, proved harder to remove than any weapon. And somewhere in the endless sprawl of the galaxy, the quiet truth spread, not loudly, not gloriously, but persistently. Humans were dangerous. Not because they conquered, but because when they chose someone, they stayed.